Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to analyze a game that I played against a 2000 Elo Rated player named Noé Ribel. And the game isn't really interesting in itself. I just want to show you a critical moment in the game, which is, I think, this one. No, a little bit further. Yes, it's right there. Okay. So what has to be realized, its position is the following. So it was an advanced Caro-Kann. So if you watch a couple of game analyses, you will just see that, usually, this is my blitz online repertoire, but I try that over the board. And what's happening is the following. I fixated the pawn completely with my knight, so the rook can't infiltrate the c-file. So now I will have an easy time putting a rook on the c-file and eventually one day a rook on the g-file. The problem that I have is that if I ever move my rook to g8, the queen might eventually get on the dark squares. Notice that I have every pawn on the light square, and he has a lot of pawns on the dark squares, so I could have a problem. But I didn't get that during the game, so he played rook d8, I played rook g8, and now he went queen e3, which is just preparing himself to play on the dark squares. I played rook g6, which the engine doesn't like. The engine says to play rook g4 to fight against the d4 square. Now I had a hard time after queen h6 to really visualize what I have to play. Okay, I guess the engine just doesn't care because after captures, if you give me a check, then I can go king f8. If you give me a check, I hide and there is nothing. And if you capture on h5, I just capture here with check. I don't know if that's exactly what the engine has in mind, but I could see a world where it's the case. I don't want to check with the engine now, so regardless. Here I went rook g6 just to prevent the queen from getting in. This is also a decent move. He went rook d3, not a5, because he was basically attacking my knight. Queen c1, and now I went knight e6, thinking that I can play rook c8 because the queen is, the queen just won the control over the dark squares. I was like, over the c-file. So I went knight c6, which is just a mistake. I should have gone for, rook g4, just trying to apply even more pressure, maybe organize one day an f4 and attack the pawn, eventually threatening to win it. But I went knight e6. He went rook c3, which the engine doesn't like, and I also didn't like this move because it's dropping a pawn. But my opponent isn't a noob or a beginner. If a 2000 Elo rated player sacrifices a pawn, that means, he has an idea in mind. And this is why, in this position, I started to calculate the move knight takes e4 and ended up playing the move. And after queen e3, which happened in the game, I captured, he captured back, and he thought that he has enough compensations. Why? Because the queen is attacking the pawn. And if I start to play something like this, he will just move around, maybe rook c7. There could be, again, a couple of issues, with my king. Rook on the 7th, maybe rook on the 8th. Who knows? Maybe there will be some checkmate along the c-file. But I played rook g4, giving myself eventually one day some moves like rook to c4, and also if there is a check now, at some point I could be hiding behind, and the queen will have a hard time penetrating the dark squares. Rook fc1, and I made a mistake. I captured on b2, and now according to the engine, I am dead lost. But why? Let's turn around the chessboard, have it from West perspective. What has to be realized in this position is the following. The king is the weakest king ever, in the sense that this diagonal is open, this diagonal is open, the pawn is doing a great job attacking a couple of squares surrounding the king, which means that my king could eventually fall into some sort of a checkmating net or something close to that. In the game, he went rook c7, which is a huge mistake, and this is not a thing. What has to be what has to be understood here is that if he goes check, I go king f8 like in the game, and after queen e3, which starts to make use of those diagonals, I can play king g7, which is completely preventing the move queen h6. This was played in the game. I can eventually play f4, but queen 8, I'm just preventing those two checks forever. So king g7 and nothing. If he plays queen c5, he's not threatening anything anymore. Maybe I can already play f4. If he attacks me, I just defend myself. Capturing here is hard. This is still hanging. This is, a lot of problems everywhere. What had to be done is the following. He had to prepare himself against this plan of king f8 by playing queen e3 first. Now queen e3 just prepares to meet the move king f8 with queen h6. And now let's step king f8, queen h6. What could happen is that the king can be completely surrounded, and therefore rook c8 can be checkmate. So I will not be able to play king f8 at all, and the threat is still to go rook c7. So what happens if I go rook d8, try to meet rook c7, rook d7? Rook d7, yeah, check. And therefore there is nothing. But now, after rook d8, rook c7, I go king f8. Because now if you give me a check, and I block, and I run away, and you play something, like that, for example, you are not you're not playing a check. So actually, I'm in time to protect myself. Maybe it's still hard now that I'm thinking about it. Maybe I have to play something like King G7. Or am I just saying some random shit? No, I think it's just random now because now I think this is still lost. Because if I go King F8, yeah, the king is just very weak. Because in the worst case, you can also just win the pawn. This is also hanging, so there is no F4. Yeah, never mind. It's still lost for me. So second thing is after Queen E3, let's just say Rook D8. I wanted to say that you can also play Queen C5, but Rook C7 still works. Let's just say, for example, that I played D4, and this is now important. Forking, because I didn't say anything, but this is forking. The king is still weak. Rook C7, in between move. Now, if the king goes back to F8, then obviously this is still the same checkmate, so this is not working. And if you go, for example, King D8, then King H, Queen H6 again, and this is just a problem. The king is still in a mating net; it can't move. Now, if I play F4, then check, and this is the same problem, King E8, and I do not start giving random checks. I just keep putting the king into mating net. Maybe this sacrifice works, now that I'm looking at it. Yeah, I think this is just mate. Yes, it is. I can even sacrifice my queen then. I thought about Queen D6 because it's still going to be checkmate, but yeah. Maybe here I can sacrifice my queen, so it's not mate yet. But you get the main point. The king is just already being surrounded, and he just has to prepare to meet the move King F8 with Queen H6. But he started with Rook C7, and now my king is safe, and therefore I win. Now he tried to sacrifice Rook F7, but I just capture back, and after checking G6, again, he can't do anything. He tried, but as Ben Feigold always says, and this is really the motto of this course, trying is the first step to failure. I had to calculate, though, when I play Queen D4, I had to calculate what happens if Rook G7, and I saw that after all those checks, I go right there, and there is not a single check anymore. I mean, he can give me one more check, I go King G8, and there is nothing. If he goes for a check, I just capture. So still a little bit of calculation was needed. Okay, now that we saw this first game, let's just take a look at another game that I played. It was a game played at the Grenke Open. It was the 8th round. I played against Stefan Malceanu, who is a candidate master rated 2250. That's a very strong player that did some very good progress. He's a very strong player, very, very strong player, but I happen to have won the game. Now, I misplayed the opening. As always, it's always when I work for someone else and I create this opening repertoire, my students have the greatest openings repertoire ever. They reach high ratings. They just get better. But I don't really care about myself, and then I can't have the same results as my students if I'm not taking care of my own gameplay as much as I'm taking care of their gameplay. Anyway, in this position, yeah, I'm having the black pieces. So it is a Slav where, double fianchetto for white. The opening doesn't really matter. We will really take this position first. And white is just much better, because this is going to happen, and white will basically trade my center pawn for the e-pawn, like we saw it previously in the course. White will have more space in the center. Now, after 92, I went b5, which is a brutal pawn sacrifice. I'm starting with this position because the game is very long, so there is no need to talk about the opening. So my point was that if you capture, go knight takes, I have bishop a6, which skewers everything. If you go knight c3, which defends the knight and defends the pawn, I can just eliminate the knight and win the pawn and win the exchange. And if he goes knight c7, then there's rook c8 pin, and I win a piece at the very least. So you have to play, for example, something concrete, maybe trading here first. By the way, if captures 95, this, rook c1, then this is still pinned, so I can still just capture the pawn and laugh at you. So this is not good. Now, if he goes a4, by the way, I just eliminate and play queen b6, and this is just much better for me. The b file is open, I get those active rooks on the b file, at some point I will move my bishop away, the b pawn will be extremely weak. So he went e4, thinking that he can go e5, which is good. Now, when I capture on c4, I thought, okay, if he goes e5, I capture on b3 first in between. I'm attacking the queen, so if he captures my knight, I capture the queen. Once he captures back, I saw that I have knight g4, followed by knight h6, knight f5. So my knight isn't actually getting trapped. Knight h5 is effy, because he can always try to apply some pressure against me. Queen g5 is weird. Why putting myself on this diagonal? If I play g6, and this is obviously off, so this is not good. So after captures, he has to capture back. I went knight a6, and again, I thought that if he plays e5, then I go for the same maneuver. But he went a3, and the way he behaved a little bit on the board just showed me that I could play almost anything. I just have to make sure that it's practically looking well. So I thought that I can just capture, and if he goes bishop takes, and at the very least I win the pawn. So maybe he will blunder play queen takes, and this is what he did. I can't really tell her that this is literally what I thought about, but I had a little bit this feeling. When you get experience, you just see a lot of kind of chess players, so you start to get a little bit of everything. But it doesn't matter. He's a very strong player. I went knight b6. Now I'm attacking the pawn on c4, which is getting pinned. And I have to admit that I was a little bit worried. It wasn't my greatest tournament ever. I was a little bit worried about some sacrifices, some pushes, just a tiny bit. But he went e5, and this is the whole point of playing knight b6. I'm applying pressure against his pawn, and at the same time, I'm giving myself the d7 square for my knight. So he pushed f4, and now I won the pawn. By the way, I thought about bishop takes, knight takes, knight takes, but this felt a little bit off, because he goes bishop c1, he's cutting the ears of my knight, so I wasn't really happy with that theme. So I went knight takes, bishop takes, and I made a mistake. I offered him a draw. He refused, thank God. This is simple. If you realize that you're offering too many draws, just don't say a single word in your games. Do not talk to your opponents. My opponent went rook to f2, and after rook to f2, I had to come up with a plan, and this is now once again the inevitability is hitting. In this position, I realized that I'm up a pawn, but I don't know where to play. And so I decided to stare at the board and realize that my queen hasn't moved yet. Where can I put my queen? Oh, but there is an open b file, so maybe I can put my queen somewhere on the b file. But wait, the b file is open, so maybe I can play rook to b8 at some point, activate my rook. Eventually, I have the b3 square for my rook with my bishop. But I have to think about what my opponent can play, because I have to calculate, and I can't just think that my opponent will stare at me where I play. So I realized that my opponent has some options like f5, which would be creating some tensions in the center. The second I realized that, I thought, okay, let's just do something about it. If he plays f5, what is he threatening? So he's maybe threatening to capture on e6, which might give me a potential target on e6. And it's a classical game, so every single time someone creates a long-term weakness, it could be a problem, yeah. I also thought that if he goes f5, he will be opening up the bishop for this diagonal, so I was a little bit worried about f5 and about the fact that it could be capturing the pawn on e6. Also, I was worried if I go g6 that he will play f5 even harder, because now the dog squares are extremely weak. This could be a problem. Why did I think about f5? Because f5 is a move which creates a tension. Let's just assume that I play g6 and this pawn is on h4, yeah? I have to assume that since this move is creating a tension, I still have to take a look at that. Obviously, I'm not taking a look at queen takes a5 because I also see that there is no weak signal on the queen side. This is protected. If you go through weak signals, unprotected pieces, unresolved tensions, bad position pieces, unprotected pawns, unresolved tensions, this is protected. So for me, it's not a weak signal. But this could be creating a tension. The rook is already on the f file. My king doesn't have a knight on f8 or a knight on f6, so the king can become weak. But this is when it hit me. I realized that if he plays f5 and I capture rook takes, sure, the rook is getting active, but what is actually going to happen? I will show you. I play rook b8, thinking that if he goes f5, which happened to be played in the game, I could capture, and after rook takes, let's just take a look at that. He has the option of pushing pawn to e6. I don't know how difficult or bad that is, but I just know that I want to prevent any sort of dumb counterplay on the king's side, because I want to prevent that. I'm winning, I'm up a pawn, I should be winning, right? So I thought, okay, how do I prevent e6? I could put my rook there, but this would just make this diagonal even stronger for my opponent. I can play knight f8 to protect the king, and at the same time, I could eventually go on e6 and fix the pawn forever. Notice, by the way, how the dark squares are blocking the dark square bishop and how the light squares are blocking the light square bishop. So, second point that I started to ask myself is, but what about the f-file? This is not the thing. He will have a hard time attacking on the f-file because I have my bishop on c4, which guards the f1 square. So I thought, okay, I can play queen b6, which is also what I ended up playing, because now I'm winning a tempo. If he goes queen f3, then I win the bishop. Of course, I calculated a little bit further, but there was basically nothing. And I thought, okay, if once he moves back, I can play knight f8, which will prevent e6. And if he ever manages to play queen f3 or trade the bishops and then play rook f1, all I have to do is play rook b7 and defend the pawn. So I executed. I played knight f8, just making sure that e6 will never be a problem, or that if he goes e6, sacrifices a pawn to get open diagonals, then he does it at the cost of a pawn. So maybe he will have to make sure that the sacrifice is really worth it. And second thing is, if he plays queen f3, I know that I can play rook b7, which defends the pawn forever. Now, I paid myself the luxury of playing queen to b3, which happens to be a trick. If he goes rook f7, I can trade the queens. He has to capture back with the king, otherwise he loses the rook. I'm sorry, he has to capture back with the rook, otherwise he loses the rook. And I have bishop e2 fork. The second I played that, I wasn't really sure it was great, because this pawn is a passed pawn suddenly. Maybe it was a little bit effy, but who cares? It's a classical game, I'm better, so who cares? He went bishop e3, and now I simply went rook b7, just making sure that my position is simple to play. Now, he went bishop f1 with the intention that if I trade, he captures back with the rook. And if you remember what I said, in some prior chapters of the courses, of this course, you would just remember that I am not trading, my $20 bill for $20 in 1 cent coins. I don't want that. If I take on f1, so I'm trading, $20 for $20. Just to re-put the analogy in place, in case you forgot about that, if I walk up to you in the street and you have a $20 bill and I have $20 in 1 cent coins, would you rather have the bill or all those 1 cent coins, even though those two, the coins and the bill have the same value? The value, I mean, we're talking about money. Anyway, they have the same value. You prefer to have the bill. It's just much smoother, much better to have a bill rather than the coins. Just more practical. Yeah, it's better. It's simply better. Yeah. If I take on f1, even though we're both trading a bishop, so the same value, he's getting the bill. He's having the better rook. But I thought, wait, but if he captures, I capture with my queen. It's allowing my rook to get in. At the same time, applying some pressure against against the d4 pawn. So if he captures on c4, I'm the one getting the bill. So I played 96, thinking that if he trades, which happened to be played in the game, I can just capture back. And now I'm applying pressure against the d4 pawn. So I got the bill. Now he got... I'm sorry, if he plays rook f1, by the way, I saw that I have knight d4, which happens to be winning everything. And if he captures, it's check, so he's not in time to capture. And then I can play rook e7, eventually trying to protect the pawn. I thought very quickly about e6, trying to, if I capture, it's mate, but I play f6, and this pawn is way too weak. I could also play queen e4. This was, to be honest, my first instinct. But who knows what I would have gone for. We will never know. Now he went queen g4, and as always, I'm winning. I have a plan, improving my position on the queen side. I just have to make sure that his plan is not a problem. But what is his plan? Yeah, I just saw that he has some potential tension on the king side, so I have to admit, I took a look at what's happening on the king side. But I realized that if he goes bishop h6, he's not threatening anything, because if captures, I have the capture. And if he goes rook g5, which will be also attacking the g7 pawn, I mean, this is just 1, 2, 3, 4 moves. And I can play f5 eventually. It's 4 moves, like it's a lot. I'm 1, 2 moves away of actually doing something on the second. So I went rook b2. He went rook e1, because if he goes bishop h6, I thought that I have queen c2, with the intention that if you go rook d2, I have queen c1. If you move back, then I win the bishop. If you go queen there, then I trade and I capture on h6. And if you go king d2, I capture and I win. So you have to play, for example, rook to f1, after which I thought that I can play queen c3, which threatens the rook yet again, so you're not in time to do anything. And if you capture, I'm attacking the pawn. So, you have to back up, and basically you slow down, I can win the pawn. This is just not good for you. So he played rook there with the intention that I'm not attacking the rook anymore, or whatever. I don't know. And I went c5 because the queen was not protected. I just spotted the weak signal. Yeah, he can't capture and win the pawn. I'm threatening to win the pawn. Okay, so he was a little bit shocked of c5. He went rook f2. We traded the rooks. And now I thought, okay, let's just give my queen some tasks. I went queen a4, which could eventually give me some c4, and I would have a protected pass pawn, although this pawn could be a little bit weak. Also, I thought that I'm threatening the pawn, so he went queen f3. And I realized that if I capture now on d4, and he captures on d5, I play rook d8, and now I have the rook, which is behind the pass pawn. And if you have seen what we had in some other rook endgame chapters, you just know that the rook is better behind the pawn instead of in front. So rook b1 was played. I played queen c6 because he thought that he could play some rook to b7, and now I'm giving myself the move knight g5 followed by knight e4. So he went h4, preventing knight g5. Now I thought that this pawn is weak, and that this pawn is also weak, so I just play queen c7 to protect both of them. But I don't want to lose my d pawn, so I played rook d8 first with the intention of playing queen c7. He went bishop e1, attacking the pawn. I went queen c7. He went bishop f5 because I was attacking the pawn, he's protecting it. And now we are arriving at a very interesting moment of the game, which is called simplifying. So I'm up 2 pawns because I'm up 2 pawns. But I don't like the fact that this rook is super active. And I don't like the fact that this rook, even though it's defending the pawn, if there are no more rooks on the board, it will also be easier for me to promote. So I play rook b8 with the intention that if he captures on a5, which is a forcing move, so I have to calculate that, I can just capture on b1 check. He captures back, I capture, and if he gives me a check, I have knight f8 and there is no more mate. If he tries it the other way around, though, and this is now how funny that is, I saw that if captures bishop a5, I really, really, really want to play queen b1. The problem is I was queen takes queen. Not brilliant. But I saw that I can play, after bishop a5, the move d3. So I'm giving myself the move queen to b1, and if you capture the pawn, I have queen a7, and the bishop is left unprotected, and I win a piece, and the game. So he went queen c2, and now I knew that I could capture the pawn, but I didn't want to get, I didn't want to allow any counteractions, on the dark square. So I played a6, just checking a little bit what he does, just growing a garden. He captured on a5, I captured on e5, and now we're arriving at another interesting moment. So I'm up 2 pawns, I should be completely winning, but when you take a look at this position, you might be thinking, oh, but how do I evaluate that? This is very strong. This is a problem. The way I evaluate that is the following. I'm creating a lot of threats. At the same time, I'm 3 pawn moves away of promoting, and 1 pawn move away of eventually bringing the knight into the game. And this is now the thing. Let's just say you are investing in houses and buildings, so that they get more value, then you get more money after a couple of years. Now, if I tell you to tell me exactly how much your house will be worth in 10 years, you could be bringing out some mathematical statistics and tell me, yeah, in this landlord and around this zone of the country, this region is worth, let's say, X amounts per year. Yeah, 10% more, X% amount more per year. Yeah. So after 10 years, the initial price will just get, X this every year for 10 years. So you could be giving me very concrete numbers and tell me, yeah, this house that is worth $1 million now in 10 years will be worth, I don't know, 1.8 million, for example. Yeah. The thing is, you can never really say how much it will be worth. Mathematically, you can show me all the numbers and tell me whatever you want, whatever the numbers will show. But in practice, you can't explain how much more the prices will get up, but you know that it will get up because you already have some proofs, mathematical proofs, that it will go up. But you can't actually explain why, but it will be worth even more than whatever your statistics just showed. This is important. This is the same thing when you have a knight in the center or pieces in the center. I have my queen on e5, I'm creating threats, so I could be telling, yeah, I'm creating threats, checks, I'm winning a lot of time, so I will always be faster. But you actually can't even explain how much faster you will be. This is a little bit tricky, but we only see like 10% of whatever happens on the board. You just have to trust yourself. When your pieces are getting active, there will always be something that you can't recall or imagine before that will happen. So I thought, okay, he does this, but I'm like 1 or 2 moves away of just doing this, pushing, bringing the knight in the center. Maybe I will get some checks around the king. So sure, I could be the same way I would be, evaluating the price of a landlord. No, not landlord. Am I saying landlord? I meant land. Yeah, you buy a land. And I could be telling you, yeah, this knight in the center, the knight is worth 3, it's helping a pass pawn. The pass pawn could be worth the queen, so it should be like plus 12. Or, actually it's not plus 12 because the engine says centipawns and whatever. So, it's a plus 0.8 centipawns advantage, so whatever. And you could be telling me, yeah, the knight is worth 5. It's more like, it's worth like a rook. But also Kasparov said that if you have, a knight on the 6th, it's stronger than a queen, so whatever. Whatever. In practice, it will always be worth more than that. This is what has to be understood. The same way, if you understand like 10% of any concept in chess, even though you're not applying it accurately like the engine would, the only fact that you are already using it, it's already making you better and ahead of your opponents. If he goes king g2, I evaluated that though in a very strict way. I saw that I can play queen e4, forking the queen, captures, and the way I evaluated that is, this is a pass pawn, this is the square of the pawn, my king is not in the square, but if he tries to just rush for the pawn, then I have king f8. Move the bishop away, and oh, I'm in the square. Tuck, 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 tuck. And of course, if he goes a7, I do not capture because I wouldn't be in the square anymore, but I go king b7. And now the way I would win that is by basically putting my pawns on the light squares, like h5, f5, g6, f4. And once the pawns are on the light squares and not attackable, I would just shuffle around and get the pawn and win the pawn. Very small detail. And this is like plus 10 for black, by the way, if you want to count that. By the way, I do not think about playing knight c5 because this is a very important pattern now. Don't forget about that. If bishop b6, and you capture the pawn after bishop after bishop d4, the ears of the knight are getting cut off. And this is a very important pattern. It happens very often. Very, very, very often. Be careful with your knights on the side of the board. Their ears can get completely cut off. So he went king g2. He could have went king g2, but I would have played queen f4. But now he played queen f2. And like I said, I played d3, preparing to play knight d4. Bishop b4, knight d4. And the amount of troubles that are going to happen is just unmeasurable. He went king g2, but this is just blundering because he was like preparing himself to meet this move with whatever. Also, I'm giving myself some knight c2 eventually. But now I play queen e4, and the problem is wherever he goes, there will be some problems. For example, if he goes king h2, I didn't calculate everything properly, but I'm pretty sure this is just fine. You go king there. And now if he ever goes on the light squares, then this is a problem, and therefore I was ready to play g5 with the intention of going g4. And if you go that way, then, there could be some d2. If you capture, I move the knight away with check. So if he goes king g2, I was ready to play d2. If you capture, I capture back, and this is winning. And if you go queen takes, and I trade the queens with check, and then I make a queen. And I can't really tell you how accurate I was about this last phase of the game, because again, you just see 10%, you just have the main ideas. But now he just blundered because after king h3, I go king h1. I mean, it was still lost, it's just that it loses faster. And now the problem is, if he goes queen h2, I just trade the queens and go d2. I mean, he has to capture, and then I have knight f3, and I win the bishop. And if you ask, no, the pawn is not running anywhere. Important. And what else? Yeah, and he played king h4, and now I just played f5, because if king f4, then it's checkmate. If he goes king there, then it's check, like in the game. If g4, this is mate. And if king g6, queen g4, and this is basically checkmate. We saw a lot of patterns. Just to summarize everything, when you realize that you're winning, you do not have reached when you have an advantage, like for example the material advantage, it's not winning until you have a plan. The same way, when you think that you're winning, you still have to look for a couple of options or potential tensions or threats your opponents could be creating, because missing a threat can very often just throw you off and make you play the whole game badly. So what I would be recommending you is you try to find one good move or one potential answer per problem. The same way I saw that after f5 takes, I thought that e6 is a problem, which is or maybe isn't, and I saw that the f file could be a problem, so I had the move rook b7 for the f file and knight f8 for the e6 square. So one solution per problem. Okay, last game. This is the same tournament. I played against an old man, and this game is very, very hard. I just want to arrive at this moment. So it was a Caro-Kann where he played bishop f5. I don't know why I played e4. I never played e4. Anyway, yeah, I didn't know what to play. I was schizophrenic during the tournament, but this is non-opening related. My openings are great. Come on. No, but he played e5, and this position I played rook d2 with the intention to push my pawns and eventually have a pass pawn. So he went king c7, and I went d6 check, king b8, and c5, and now I have a pass pawn. So I have one of the four main advantages to reach the inevitability. Now I just need a material advantage or, this constant threat creation. Yeah. I saw c5, and I thought that after queen g5 that I can play rook f2 with the intention that if he goes rook h5, then I go rook f5, attacking the queen. The queen goes to g6, then I play something like d7, you move back, then I capture, and it's check, yeah? The problem is I missed queen h2, and I started to fall into some panic. I have to admit that I wasn't really playing competitive chess before this tournament, so I didn't know how to deal with this stress. And after queen g5, I played rook f2, and after queen h5, I first played the move d7, which is a mistake. It turns out, if I play rook f5, and you play queen h2, in this position I have queen g4. What? Yeah, exactly. I can play queen at g4. So my threat after queen g4 is to play something like, for example, yeah, now we see what the engine says. It's basically queen g7, just catching those pawns, and we're fine. And we're absolutely fine. Now, I missed that. Happens. Even now, I forgot what my analyses were. So I played d7, followed by queen d3, threatening to go queen d6, but that's not it. Let's just say you go, for example, queen h2 or whatever. Then I go rook f8. And if you capture, then I go queen d6. And if you play, for example, queen h4, trying to protect everything, then I just go queen d6 again. You have to go king a8, and I go rook f8. And the reason why I win that is because, let's just say you go, for example, a6, just a small example. I can just capture, you capture back, and I go queen e6. So it feels like, yeah, we're doing a great job, haha, but king b8, and now if I go queen e8, there is this, right? What has to be realized is that I play check first. Now if you go queen c7, I make a queen. So I win. And now when you move back, boom. And even if you go king a7, I go queen e8, and I'm just controlling this promotion square. So this is nothing. I just make a queen, and I'm winning. And this is of course not a draw, not a single check in sight anymore. So here I played queen d3. He went a6. I went queen d6, king a7. And the problem is with the way he defended is that after rook f8, there is nothing. He plays queen g5, and now there's nothing. You know, he can even just trade, now that I'm thinking about it, he can even just trade, and now it's worse, it's a draw by repetition, and there is nothing I can do about it. So I realized that my king is very weak, so I played king a3, which is alright, it's just a good defensive move, just keeping in mind that there could be some problems around my king. So my opponent went queen g4, keeping the pressure against the pawn, I have to protect that, but now he goes e4. And this is now where things become heated. This is not a quality game again. I'm really trying to keep my quality games for individual classes. Joking, it's just that I don't have a lot of them. And now, what's happening is that I knew that I have to do something active. But at the same time, I knew that I could be in deep trouble because my king is unsafe. You know, so I played queen c7, he went queen g5, just keeping an eye on my rook and defending his own. I went queen d6, he went e3, and this is not an accident. So, I thought in this position that I have to play the move rook b2. The problem is I saw that he can give me a check, and even if I go rook b3, he gives me a check, I go back, he gives me a check, and now I really, really, really wanted to go, for example, king a4. The problem is it's a draw, right? Now, I thought, and I don't know how to word it better than that. I did think that here, after captures, I could also play the move king a4, with the intention that now if you give me a check, I try to block, just that this is mate, this is unlucky. So I have to basically move back, yeah. You give me a check, and again, what I thought is that, yeah, maybe he goes for this line, which is a trap, if he goes this, I go back. I'm sorry, it's not a trap in this position, because he gives me a check, and basically it's a draw, yeah. So what I thought is, okay, but let's just bait my opponent. I mean, it only works against 2000 Elo Rated Players. Let's just bait him and play queen d6, thinking. So I knew that it would be a draw with, queen c4, queen c5, and so on, if he gives me a check from c4. It's just that, again, if there is a pawn on e3, what I realize is that now if he gives me the same checks, so check this, I could be baiting him into playing queen c1. Now, if queen c1, I go king a4, the problem is if I go king b4 is that there is queen d2. But I could bait him, and maybe he will think it's a draw or something. I really can't tell. It's just that, wait, I have to show you because this is very dumb. Yeah, exactly. I thought that I could bait him here by capturing on c5 instead of going queen c1, because queen c1 is just a draw, yeah? He has those draws. But if he captures on c5, I go back, and now there is not a single check anymore because the pawn is on e3, and therefore there is no more queen f2. What wouldn't be possible with the pawn on e4? This is what I just looked for a way to explain that, but this is what came through my mind. I could bait him into capturing the pawn on c3, then on c5, because it wins a pawn with check, and just hope that he would do that after putting the pawn on e3. He did worse than that. He played rook b8, thinking now that everything is protected, and if I capture, making a queen, there's mate. So this is not good. But it's just that I queen first, because if he goes rook takes, it's mate, and if he captures that way, then I go rook b7. has to capture back, I capture, and this is of course stopped. So like I do this, and this is just not promoting anymore. So there's a little bit of baiting. We were a little bit in time, in time scramble. But here's the same story. Yeah, he played rook. He played queen takes e3. I played rook b3, and now it's funny. He saw that if he captures, I go king b2. There is nothing. And now if he goes queen c1, it's even worse because now after king b4, okay, now that would be allowing queen a4, queen c4. I'm sorry, but now after king b4, there is not even queen d2. So this is just worse than anything else. So he was very unlucky with that. And okay, now instead of capturing there, I just gave a check first to capture everything with check. Saved my king, and yeah, now there isn't really much we can do. I captured en passant. He went queen e6, and he accepted to get checkmated. But yeah, it was just to talk a little bit about this baiting stuff. It was a very impressive game. The concepts here are very interesting. What I would be recommending you is just to, go on with the thing. We saw a lot of concepts. We saw a lot of things. All those concepts combined with a good opening repertoire plus basically a good calculation training and tactics training, you will have a decent level. The level, you will have the skill set that will be enough to reach those 2000 elo. Now, once again, there are concepts, there's calculation, there's training. There is still one very important aspect, which is you play, you analyze, and you fix what's wrong, and then you repeat. You play, you fix what's wrong, you analyze, and then you repeat. And on and on and on and on. With that, if you are really, really low, you can get very, very, very high. You know basically how to get the main stuff in, you know how to get everything in. I'm very happy with what I just shared. And yeah, thank you very much. There will be, I think, more content that I will be analyzing and recording after the uploading of this course. So if you have the course, then you will always have access to more premium stuff. But yeah, I'm very happy with what I just did. Thank you very much for being on this course. See you in the future. Take care.